Imagine flying deep into enemy skies, hundreds of miles from safety, with death lurking in the clouds. Now picture the one fighter built to guard those bombers, on their longest, most dangerous missions, but flown only once in combat. Why was the P-47N Thunderbolt, the ultimate long-range escort, barely used before the war ended? Today, we uncover the story behind that single mission, and the fighter that could have changed everything. In these images, we can see the newly introduced P-47N aircraft from the 414th Fighter Group. These planes are shown taxiing and flying from their base on Iwo Jima. The main reason for capturing Iwo Jima was to establish a strategic airbase that could support long-range fighter escorts for the B-29 bombers, which were carrying out missions against the Japanese home islands. The modified P-47s were specifically intended to escort these B-29 bombers during their long and dangerous flights. The P-47N was carefully designed with various improvements to extend its range, making it suitable for these escort missions. Interestingly, despite the expectations, the P-47NS participated in only one B-29 escort mission. In this operation, 160 P-47NS accompanied 245 B-9 bombers on a firebombing raid over the Japanese city of Yawata. The purpose of this video is to examine the modifications made to the P-47N model and to discuss its role and performance during its sole escort mission. A memorandum from the 20th Air Force dated September 29, 1944, titled Air Bases for Fighter Escort, included a recommendation to capture Iwo Jima. The plan was for the 7th Air Force to use this island as a base for launching fighter escorts for B-29 missions. According to the memo, the new long-range P-47N fighters were expected to be ready to equip 3 fighter groups by January 1945. The memo also emphasized that the highest priority for deploying the P-47N should be to support the 21st Bomber Command's escort requirements. Additionally, a report from November 1944 by the Assistant Chief of Air Staff Intelligence provided a detailed description of the P-47N model. This version of the Thunderbolt incorporated several changes to significantly increase its operational range, enabling it to escort B-29 bombers deep into enemy territory. Although the fuselage remained similar to the earlier D model, the P-47N featured a longer wing and repositioned landing gear for improved stability. The redesigned wing was capable of holding an extra 100 gallons of fuel. The wingspan was extended by 18 inches compared to the D model, and the total fuel capacity was increased to provide a combat radius of approximately 1,200 miles. A new turbocharger allowed the aircraft to reach critical altitudes above 30,000 feet, giving it the greatest range of any fighter plane at the time. One image compares the older P-47D model with the newer P-47N, highlighting the most visible difference, the shape of the wingtips. The older D model had rounded tips, while the N model had squared-off wingtips. When viewed from above, there is also a detailed cutaway view of the P-47N that lists 10 new features added to enhance the aircraft's capabilities. Another illustration, taken from a 1945 P-47N pilot training manual, outlines the aircraft's fuel system and capacities. The internal main fuel tank could hold 270 gallons, while an internal auxiliary tank added 100 gallons. Each wing held an additional 90 gallons. There was also an external belly tank that could carry 110 gallons, and external wing tanks that held 165 gallons on each side. Altogether, the P-47N had a total fuel capacity of 990 gallons. Other enhancements made to boost long-range performance included a more powerful engine, extra fuel storage in the wings, advanced electronic controls, an autopilot system, homing radios, tail warning radar, and additional equipment designed to reduce pilot fatigue during long missions. An April 1945 issue of the Air Intelligence Weekly Digest provided further details about the Thunderbolt's improved characteristics. The P-47N had a range exceeding 1,000 miles and could reach speeds up to 450 miles per hour. Its Pratt & Whitney Edward Lapon 00 series engine delivered 100 more horsepower on takeoff than previous models. The improved turbocharger and water injection system gave the aircraft more power than the D model. The wing's surface area was expanded by 22 square feet, and the internal fuel volume was nearly doubled. The aileron area was also enlarged, improving the plane's agility and maneuverability in combat. Because the P-47N was designed for extended missions, special attention was given to pilot comfort. Automatic controls were added, the rudder pedals could fold to provide more legroom, and the seat was upgraded with better cushioning and armrests to reduce fatigue on long flights. Lastly, a table from the June 5, 1945, issue of the 20th Air Force's weekly newsletter compared the combat radius of the P-47N with the proposed P-51H model. Although the P-51H had similar range capabilities, it never saw combat in World War II. Despite its enhancements, the P-47N stood out as the primary long-range escort fighter used during that phase of the war. The P-47N model had an impressive combat range that allowed it to cover a distance of about 1,175 miles. When it carried a 110-gallon fuel tank under its belly, along with 2 additional wing tanks, each holding 165 gallons. This extended range made the P-47N one of the longest-range fighter aircraft of its time. A chart from a 1944 Army Air Forces evaluation document compared the combat ranges of various fighter models and clearly showed this advantage. For example, the earlier P-47D model, with its fuel capacity of 670 gallons, could only manage a combat radius of about 575 miles. In contrast, the P-47N, with its full fuel load of 990 gallons, nearly doubled that range, surpassing all the other fighter planes listed in that evaluation. However, this extended range didn't come from improved fuel efficiency. In fact, the P-47N burned slightly more fuel per hour than the older P-47D. A record from the 7th Air Force tracked fuel consumption by month and year and showed that in March 1945, the P-47D consumed around 112 gallons of fuel per hour, while the P-47N used approximately 117 gallons per hour, a modest increase of about 4.5%. This means that the extra range was purely due to the increased fuel capacity, not because the aircraft was more economical in fuel use. When compared to the P-51D Mustang, the P-47N's fuel consumption was significantly higher. According to data from the 7th Fighter Command stationed at Iwo Jima, the P-47N burned about 106 gallons per hour, while the P-51D consumed only 60 gallons per hour. That's roughly a 69% higher fuel burn rate for the P-47N. Still, despite this, the P-47N was specifically valued for missions that required longer distances. Especially in the vast Pacific theater, when it came to combat performance, the P-47N's experience was limited, especially in Europe, where it never saw combat action. A World War II Atlas document dated August 1, 1945, depicted the territories still under Japanese control, and it was in this region that the P-47N operated. At that time, 4 P-47N fighter groups were active in the Pacific. 3 of these, the 318th, 413th, and 507th fighter groups were based on Okinawa, while the 414th fighter group was stationed on Iwo Jima. A map from June 1945 detailing Allied airfields on Okinawa shows that these groups were based on the island of Yontan, one of the main air bases on Okinawa. Interestingly, Okinawa also has historical significance as the place where the famous American war correspondent Ernie Pyle lost his life. An operational map from the 1945 Olympic plan shows the projected fighter aircraft ranges from Okinawa, indicating that the P-47N could cover distances of 500, 800, and even 1,000 miles, enough to reach as far as Tokyo, demonstrating its strategic value. The only time the P-47N escorted B-29 bombers during World War II was on August 8, 1945. On that day, 160 P-47Ns from Okinawa accompanied 245 B-9 bombers on a mission to firebomb the Japanese city of Yawata, located on the northern tip of Cuba. Yawata was approximately 550 miles from the P-47N base, comfortably within the fighter's 1,175-mile combat range. A tactical mission report from the 21st Bomber Command, dated the same day, included a map outlining the exact route taken by the bombers and their escorts. The map also marked the locations of air-sea rescue vessels, including submarines, destroyers, and rescue aircraft, placed along the route to assist any downed crews. A summary of this escort mission shows that the 318th, 413th, and 507th Fighter groups together provided 151 P-47Ns that flew over the target area. During the operation, 5 Thunderbolts were lost in combat. American pilots reported seeing between 55 to 65 enemy fighters. The P-47N pilots claimed they shot down 13 enemy aircraft, with 2 more probably destroyed, and 6 additional planes damaged. All these encounters occurred while the P-47NS were performing their escort duties. Besides aerial combat, the P-47NS also attacked ground targets during the mission. They destroyed 1 locomotive and damaged 4 passenger rail, disrupting Japanese transportation lines. Altogether, the Thunderbolt pilots fired a total of 34,353 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition during this mission, which averages to about 228 rounds fired per aircraft. This combination of air combat and ground attack capability demonstrated the versatility and power of the P-47N, even though its use in combat was limited near the end of the war. The P-47 Thunderbolts met up with the B-29 bombers, exactly as planned, and provided strong and reliable escort both on the way to the target and during the return. Their presence was effective in preventing Japanese fighters from reaching and attacking the bombers directly. However, the Japanese interception efforts during this mission appeared to be more intense compared to recent encounters. This increase in enemy activity was likely because the Japanese did not anticipate that the bombers would have fighter escorts. As a result, they sent up more fighters to try to intercept the bombers, hoping for an easier target. The details of the aerial combat and the specific circumstances surrounding the losses of the P-47s are provided in further records. For instance, the 318th Fighter Group, which had 44 P-47s on this mission, reported that the Japanese seemed to be using a tactic designed to pull the escorts away from the bombers. However, their overall coordination appeared poor, and their tactics seemed disorganized. Despite their efforts, the Japanese pilots lacked discipline and did not coordinate their attacks effectively. The P-47 pilots, on the other hand, employed skilled shooting techniques, firing at the enemy using 90-degree deflection shots, shooting from the rear, and even attacking while in steep dives. Out of the 5 P-47s lost during the mission, the causes for 4 of these losses are known. Captain Henley had to bail out of his aircraft for reasons that remain unclear, and a rescue mission was being arranged to retrieve him. Flight Officer J.B. Hill also bailed out over the target area, but the cause for his bailout is also not known. Lieutenant Kempner was last seen in his life raft after bailing out, and efforts were underway to rescue him as well. Lieutenant Marvin bailed out, but when rescue submarines and Dumbo aircraft arrived at his last known location, they found only his life jacket, suggesting he was lost. Additionally, 1 B-29 bomber was forced to ditch into the sea, and 2 P-47s stayed in the area to mark the spot, but had to leave when their fuel began running low. A Dumbo rescue aircraft was dispatched to assist. The 413th Fighter Group, which fielded 54 P-47s for this mission, reported that their rendezvous with the bombers happened right on schedule. These pilots engaged the Japanese fighters by attacking from the rear at very high speeds, which gave them the advantage. Observers noted that the Japanese pilots did not seem particularly aggressive or skilled, indicating a possible lack of experience. Similarly, the 507th Fighter Group, contributing 53 P-47s, observed that the enemy once again tried to distract the escorts and draw them away from the bombers. During the engagement, Flight Officer Paul Lin was seen entering an uncontrollable spin and crashing into the water. Unfortunately, no one saw him deploy a parachute, suggesting he did not survive. The bombers' crews also provided their perspective on the enemy's attacks. According to their reports, only 1 B-29 was shot down by enemy fighters, which was relatively low considering the scale of the mission, thanks to the protection provided by the P-47 escorts. The B-29s were largely shielded from further losses. The gunners aboard the bombers themselves managed to claim the destruction of 2 enemy fighters. In total, Japanese aircraft launched 53 separate attacks on the bomber formation. Between 10 and 20 of these attacks involved Japanese fighters dropping phosphorus bombs on the bombers. However, because of the pressure from the P-47s, the Japanese pilots were often forced to release these bombs prematurely, reducing their effectiveness. The subject of phosphorus bomb attacks on bombers has been covered in detail in another video on this channel, and these tactics were generally regarded as ineffective. Many of the enemy fighter attacks were either stopped completely or disrupted by the Thunderbolts before they could pose a serious threat. In the end, the mission was declared a success. The B-29 bombers managed to set fire to 1.22 square miles of Yawata's urban area, of which 1.12 square miles were residential and 0.1 square miles were industrial zones. To give some context, the second atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki destroyed about 1.88 square miles of the city. according to a 1946 report by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey on Atomic Bomb Effects. In conclusion, the P-47N Thunderbolts were specifically designed for the long-range mission of escorting bombers deep into enemy territory. Despite their impressive capabilities, they only participated in one escort mission during World War II, which does not provide enough combat experience to thoroughly assess their full potential and performance in such roles. If you enjoyed this in-depth review and analysis of the P-47N model and its escort mission, please consider supporting the channel by commenting, liking the video, or subscribing to World War II US bombers for more content. Looking back, the P-47N Thunderbolt was a powerful and capable fighter, built for a mission that history allowed it to perform only once. Its extended range, heavy armament, and escort potential proved themselves in that single operation. But the war was ending, and there was little time left to see what more it could achieve. In the end, the P-47N became a symbol of what might have been a fighter ready for battles that never came. Its story remains a brief but fascinating chapter in the final days of World War II, reminding us how quickly the pace of war can shift, leaving even the best machines with unfinished legacy.